Hi, welcome to my channel. Today I am going to do a Friday Reads video. I'm going to attempt to do these every Friday, and I'm doing this in lieu of the fact that it's impossible for me to do individual book review videos. I may begin doing them from here on in at some point, not today, not tomorrow, but I may resume that. But as of now, I have over 100 books that I've read since my last individual book review. So to start off, let me tell you what I've read. I've read 14 books, and with those 14 books, I read 4,152 pages, which averages out to 593 pages a day at the rate of 2 books a day. In some days I've read 3 books because, for example, yesterday I only read 1 book. Today I haven't read anything. So the average is 2 books a day. I think that's all I want to talk about on that. So I'm just going to jump right in. The first book I read, and before I tell you what the name of that book is, I want to tell you that I downloaded a book either from NetGalley or Edelweiss at the advice of my friend, Kristina, and she recommended this book called The Southern Side of Paradise by Kristy, Woodson, Harvey. And when I got that book, quite naturally, Kristina is like, well, you know, Robin, you're going to have to read the whole series. So I went to the library, online library, and I grabbed the first 2. So the first one is Slightly South of Simple, and I'm using my notes here. I just capsulize everything, and that way I can refer to my notes because there's a lot of books here. As I mentioned, it's Slightly South of Simple by Kristy, Woodson, Harvey. It's the first book in the Peachtree Bluff series, and it got 5 stars from me. This was released on April 25th in 2017. Now, this series follows a mother named Ansley and her 3 daughters, and they are Caroline, Sloan, and Emerson. Each daughter contacts their mother because they're in need. They need to come home. They need to be back with their mom for one reason or another. Now, the first person is Caroline, the oldest daughter. She's very pregnant, and she has a 9-year-old daughter. And she just found out that her husband was sleeping with a supermodel. And her husband is from New York money. There's a lot of gossip, so she had to get out of New York. So she goes home to her mother's, and that's why she's there. Then there's Sloan, the middle daughter. Sloan has 2 boys, they're toddlers, and her husband is deployed, and she's having a hard time raising the boys, so she wants to spend time at home with her mother. Then there's Emerson, the youngest. She's a very successful actress. She's happy in her life, but she needs to be with her mom for a while too, so she comes back home. That's their situations. Then you have Ansley, the mom, who is reaching a point where her life is just a little bit unsettled. She had a rough go. She lost her husband 16 years previously, found out that the money that he was supposed to leave to her and the girls just wasn't there. So she managed to create a very successful design business, and she's done good for herself, but there's just something missing from her life. And that something missing from her life is in the form of a man named Jack. He's someone from her past, and he wants to be in her future. And this forces Ansley to closely examine her past and the difficult decisions that she's made, and how these decisions affected her family in general, and how, if these things are revealed, how they could affect the lives of her daughters now. Now, as each book is written, and there's 3 books, it's a trilogy. Each book is written always in the mother's point of view, but in each daughter's point of view. So in this one here, it's Caroline's point of view. So we learn all about Caroline, her marriage, her husband, what he put her through, and the decisions that she makes, and what's going to happen to her when she has the baby, and we get all of that. It's a very warm and affecting story. I was very enthralled with the drama. I couldn't turn the pages fast enough. I read this book in one sitting. I laughed, I cried, I really, really enjoyed it. There was sadness and there was joy, and I was right there with it. As a matter of fact, it was so good that thankfully I downloaded the second book, and and the reason I said it was good that I downloaded it because I read it right away. I turned around and I picked it right up. Okay, moving on. The second book is The Secret to Southern Charm, and that's also by Kristy, Woodson, Harvey, obviously, and it got 5 stars from me as well. As a matter of fact, all 3 books got 5 stars. Now, as mentioned, we had Caroline's story, and now we're going to focus on Sloane. And at the very end of with a cliffhanger in slightly south of Simple, we find out Sloane gets devastating news about her husband. Devastating news. So the story picks up 3 weeks later, and by the time the story closes in the first book, Caroline made a decision. Remember, she had to deal with the fact that her husband cheated on her. So Caroline's made a decision, and she's rolling along with that. And now Sloane is really in a bad way because of this news that she got about her husband. And again, this story takes place in Sloane's POV. And 3 weeks have passed, and Sloane is dealing with this reeling news, and she's trying to get on with decisions she's got to make for herself and for her children, and she's making some bad decisions, but she has the help, support, and love of her family, and they help her through it, and we get to see where her journey takes her. The story flows incredibly well. It's a very affecting drama. It's, as mentioned, that we have the multiple points of view, and you feel like you're right there with them. So just like I read the first book and I read the second book, I knew that I wanted to dive into the third book. And the thing is, the third book does not come out until May. But because I get advanced reader or advanced reviewers copies, then quite naturally I already have it. So I had to read it. There's no way. There was another cliffhanger at the end of the second book, so there was no way that I could not go ahead and read the final book, and that is The Southern Side of Paradise. Now we've had Caroline's story, we've had Sloane's story, and by the way, Ansley is still facing her predicament, so her story continues in here alongside Emerson's story. As mentioned, Emerson is the third daughter, the youngest daughter. She's an actress, but she's facing she's getting the roles that she wants. She's making progress in her career, but she's facing 2 things. One is some major health issues, and secondly, she's trying to make a decision about her future. She's been proposed to. What will she decide? And in the process of making this decision, she has a moral dilemma, and with this moral dilemma, it's going to color her whole future. Now, that's pretty much the whole story of the 3 women and their mom, Ansley. Back to Ansley. She has to make a decision, but this decision that she makes will indeed affect each girl in their own way. And I will tell you that the drama here was incredible. I want to thank Gallery Books and NetGalley for the third book, because it opened my eyes to the first 2 books, and it was really enjoyable, very emotional. It did have its light moments, and I do appreciate when the tension was lifted, because it helped me to take a deep breath and to keep on reading. So I really enjoyed that, and that's it. That trilogy is over. I'm glad that I read it. I'm going to miss it. And I have a strong feeling that I'm going to end up going right back to it as a reread, definitely. My next read wasn't so great. It was Hearts of the Missing by Potenz. Of course, I'll show the graphic. This was a do not finish title, so therefore I give it 1 star. This is about a fictional Indian tribe where one of the members commits suicide, And in the process of the story being set up, and I did read 35% of it, there were a lot of traditions and customs, and this involved spirits and sightings of spirits, and it just was outside of my comfort zone, so I chose not to finish that title. But because I read a third of it, I included it in this wrap up. The next book I read was an omnibus, actually, and that is The Windmill Cafe by Poppy Blake. I gave that book 3.5 stars. 2 books I gave 3 stars, and 1 I gave 3.5, so I rounded it to 3.5 stars. Now, before I tell you, well, I'll just go right into it. It's about a story of a woman named Rosie Barnes who had to deal with getting away from heartbreak and a rough life in a big city. So she sets up a cafe in a small town. What was the name of the town? I can't even tell you the name of the town. But she sets up a new life, and it's a great little story because she's working on a relationship that slowly builds. So it's not really a romance, it's more like a women's fiction. But in each case, there's some serious crime. Somebody gets hurt. Maybe it's a poisoning, one is an accidentally, just a couple of accidents, so to speak, over the course of each book. Now, in Summer Breeze, that's the first one. Obviously, like I mentioned, they're all set in the same location. By the way, the town's name is Willoughby. And the reason that Rosie even went to Willoughby and left the big city was because she found out that her fiancé was cheating. So an accident occurs to one of the guests at the cafe. So she decides to investigate it. And the reason that she decides to investigate it is because she's concerned not only for the town in general, but especially her cafe. It was a poisoning, or it may have been a poisoning. So if it was, would anybody else in the cafe be affected? So the police are kind of dragging their feet. So she steps in and she asks a lot of questions, and she doesn't rule anything out, and she ends up solving it. Now the next book, that was Summer Breeze, by the way, and I'm just going to have, so the review is only going to have one graphic for the Windmill Cafe. In Autumn Leaves, which was the second book, I reviewed that independently or individually on June 26th, actually. And that one, I believe I gave 3.5 stars. And in this particular case, there's a hike going on because it's a celebration about to happen, but also there's an event. And during this event, a big hike, there's an accident. Someone is accidentally shot with an arrow. She doesn't think it's an accident, so she decides to investigate it, and that's the mystery there. The last book is Christmas Trees, and in this book, her ex, Harry, turns up. Not so much to get back together, but to offer her a great business deal, something that can really, really affect her future financially, so she considers that. But meanwhile, it's time for the town's Christmas celebration, and there's going to be a wedding, and she gets all involved with that, but another accident happens, so she becomes an amateur sleuth again, starting her own investigation. So each book was pretty good. Not anything to write home about, but I enjoyed it, and the mysteries were rather light, the romance was rather light, and I think that's why the publishers refer to it as women's fiction. So that was from Harper Impulse and NetGalley, and I want to thank them for that book. The next book I read was part of a series. Actually, I'm moving my notes around because I read 4 books in succession from the same series. And the series is Cape Charade. And the author is Christina Dodd, and the first book is Hard to Kill. In Hard to Kill, Captain Kellen Adams is introduced to us. She thought her life was going to be up in arms, but she got an opportunity for a sudden job. She just left the army. Now she has a job, and if she can crack a code, she can amass a fortune. If she doesn't, then she could lose her life. And that's pretty much the setup for us meeting Kellen. That's a brief novella, only 61 pages, so not much to say about that. The next book in the series is a full-length novel, and that's called Dead Girl Running. And it's considered the first book in the series because the previous book is 0.5, and this is book 1. Now, in this book, it's called Dead Girl Running, and it's a very appropriate title because Kellen is running. And who she's running from is the fact that she left or ran away from her brutally abusive husband. He vowed to kill her and then himself if she ever tried to leave him. But all the while, all the time that she was with him, he massacred her. He did terrible things to her. So she was able to take over the identity of her cousin. Something happened to her cousin. She took over her identity. She joined the service, but all of a sudden she's homeless. She gets shot. All kinds of things happen to her, and she's on the run still. Well, she gets an offer for this job at a resort called the Yearning Sands Resort. It's an upscale resort, and she's a manager there. Well, the owners decide to go on a sudden vacation, leaving her in charge. And in essence, it also puts her in charge of security. And then a woman's dismembered body is discovered, so now she has to take on the investigation to make sure nobody else is in danger at the resort. And as she's doing this, part of something that she was good at in the Army was cataloging people. So as she starts questioning people and looking around and seeing different things that are going on, she will say, she'll give a quick, in her mind, a quick bio of a person, and this is how the book does it. And even whether or not they're friend or foe, and that's allowing her to figure out who she feels safe about, and even if she could still be in danger herself. Now, once I discovered the series through the third book, which is Families and Other Enemies, and I'll talk about that in just a moment, I had to go to my library and get any book that was already out because I knew that I was going to like it. And I'm addicted to reading series, so I had to get that. So that's pretty much that. It was left with a cliffhanger. As a matter of fact, I want to tell you something. Just before each book, or in the blurb of each book, it tells you 3 facts about her. The facts in this book, by the way, are she has a gunshot scar in her forehead, she lost memory for a year, and only part of her name is the truth. That's the 3 facts. Those facts change because at the end of the book, there's a cliffhanger. Now, I'm going to tell you what that cliffhanger is. Because the next book, which is another novella, it's Families and Other Enemies. It's only 82 pages, but at the end of Dead Girl Running, the cliffhanger changes those 3 facts about herself. Those 3 facts are she has a bullet scar, a scar from a bullet in her forehead. She has memory loss. And the new fact is she has a daughter. She gave birth to a daughter. 7 years ago, yes, she gave birth to a daughter, but because of her loss of memory, she has no recollection of it. And it turns out that someone that we met in the first book named Max is a man she fell in love with after escaping her husband. And before she got shot, she got pregnant. These aren't spoilers, by the way. She got pregnant, and she has this daughter. She leaves the hospital, and she doesn't remember anything, has no memory. Well, in this book, she's on the run again. This time, she's on the run from responsibility. How could you be a mother to a 7-year-old after some of the trauma that she went through that we just read in the first book, or the first 2 books? She takes a job at a place where she can help other people. And what this does, this novella, all it does is it sets the stage for the next book in the series. And that next book in the series, I'm moving right on, is What Doesn't Kill Her. It's a full-length novel. I gave it 5 stars. And in What Doesn't Kill Her, she's still coping with this memory gap. She's still coping with the fact that she's a mother, but she's in danger. Yet again, her danger never lets up. The danger to her never lets up. So now that this danger has increased, she's forced to spend time with Max, but not only Max, but with her daughter. And this has very pleasant consequences, actually. Not easily come by, though, because it's a huge shock. But she spends time with Max and with her daughter. And the question is, will this become a happy little family? Will she find peace in her life? What's going to happen? Well, it's a fast-paced story. It goes lickety-split. And she takes off again. She ends up in danger. And we have to see what happens. And I'll leave you to that. Now, excuse me, I have a cold. What Doesn't Kill Her, it's a thrilling tale of suspense and mystery, but because of Max and a little girl, it brings in romance and family. So I really like that addition. It's not over yet, because there's 2 more books that follow this year. I don't know if there's more books beyond that, but the next 2 books are Hidden Truths and Strangers She Knows. So I'm looking forward to those. Moving on, we have To Wed an Heiress, which is by Ranney. Now, To Wed an Heiress is the second book in the All for Love series. Last month, I read To Love a Duchess, which was a great read, and this one is as well. As a matter of fact, I gave this 5 stars. And this is how a book where Mercy Rutherford escapes North Carolina to get away from a very awful, awful fiancé named Gregory. And she rushes off and she takes her maid along with her. And she goes to Scotland because that's where her extended family is. And by the way, she's an heiress. And as an heiress, she has money that the family wanted her to give to her family in Scotland. So she has a dual purpose. She's escaping, but she's also carrying money. Well, she is run over by this airship that's driven by Lennox Cathehart. She gets hurt, so he takes her and the maid, and he cares for them, and they go on their way, and she gets to go to continue on to her families. Well, she learns 2 things. She learns that he's the Earl of Morton and that he's a diehard enemy of her family. And that's really too bad, because in a very short time together, she's drawn to him. He makes her heart flutter. Well, as it turns out, Gregory, the fiancé, followed Mercy to Scotland, and when he shows up, hands down, we're getting married, that's it. And he has control. He's a very controlling person. So Mercy has to come up with an idea, and in her idea, she's like, okay, I like Lennox. Lennox likes me. Let me get him to agree to become my betrothed, to marry me, and then I can once and for all be done with Gregory. Well, it's a great story. Mercy's terrific. She grabs the bull by the horn, so to speak. She knows what she wants, and she goes after it, and nothing stops her. Lennox is a great guy. He's absolutely wonderful. He's a genius because he created the airship and other inventions, but he has a very warm heart, and he has a very good reason for why he's at odds with her family. So it was a good story. I enjoyed it, and I want to thank Avon and Edelweiss for that art review. Then there is The Dare by Wyer. Now, I really enjoyed The Dare because in The Dare, it was an early read, and it doesn't come out until April 25th. And each book, by the way, I'll put the release date in the description box in case I forget to mention it in this video here. But in The Dare, Jane Hopkins' daughter doesn't come home from school one day. Well, she doesn't wait. She acts on it right away. She starts calling her daughter's friends in a frantic manner. She's trying to figure out where her daughter is. Sadly, her daughter's body is discovered. It was too late. And so this becomes a case of Detective Inspector Natalie Ward. Now, The Dare is the 3rd book in the the Detective Natalie Ward series. So I read the first 2 books. They were great. I gave them 5 stars. And in turn, I gave this one 5 stars as well. Now, Natalie has a hard time for 3 reasons. One, she has a daughter the same age as the girl that died, so she feels very close to the case. 2, she had a similar case where there were teenage murder victims, and that case did not go well, and she's still affected by that. And thirdly, she has a very difficult marriage, and that's not going well. Meanwhile, she begins her investigation, and she starts investigating several suspects, and she thinks she knows who might be involved, but sadly enough, in just one day, another teen girl goes missing. Now, of course, Natalie wants to know, did they know one another? Are the cases connected? And a kind of a spoiler, but it's in the blurb I'll just mention here, and I'm only going to say this. Something unimaginable happens in her own family, in Natalie's own family. So you've got the girl that was deceased, another girl that's missing named Harriet, and then something happens in Natalie's family. Now, the story's told in her point of view, but we do get another point of view, and that's from the voice of the killer and of their choice to harm other girls. So that's kind of creepy. Meanwhile, this is all about a game. It's called the Disappear Dare. It's a very social media challenge where teens agree to disappear, to go off grid for 24, 48, 72 hours to pretty much terrify their family and just to see if they can play the game. So the question is, can Natalie tie these girls' disappearances in to this Disappear Dare? It's a compelling story. It was a great read. As I mentioned, it doesn't come out until April, but I enjoyed reading it. Every book that I've talked about here, every review is already on Goodreads. They won't go up on the blog until their release date. So either they'll go on the blog on the release date or as they're scheduled so that I can post reviews one at a time. So this review won't come out on the blog until April. The next book I read was due to a recommendation from Fashan, and that was A Madness So Discreet by Mindy McGinnis. Now, this is about a girl named Grace May who ends up in a Boston insane asylum because she's pregnant. Now, this is a time in history when if a girl is considered to be promiscuous, that's reason enough that she could be committed. Well, inside this girl, this girl Grace has trapped her voice. She's trapped in the asylum, but her voice is trapped inside her. So she refuses to speak. She doesn't speak at all. But she's a brilliant person, and that's going to pan out later. Now, something happens to her when she actually uses her voice, but she does more than use her voice. She exhibits unspeakable violence, and this puts her into the dark cellars. And in this cellar, she's discovered by a doctor who can tell that she's very sharp, she has a great memory, and she may not be as mad as she's been said to be. Now, he gets her away from the dangerous Boston asylum to an ethical Ohio asylum, but when they get to Ohio, there are murders of young women. So this doctor creates a friendship with Grace, and she becomes an investigator, like a sleuth of sorts. So this is where the story drops for me, because you're thinking, at least I'm thinking, because this doctor is a specialist in the field of phrenology, which is, please forgive me, which is getting to the madness of the mind. Why do people go mad? Why is it that some people are sane? And that's what his field is. But the story shifts from discussing all of that to mystery. So I think the drop-off was kind of sharp and the shift was kind of sharp. So it's kind of twisted. It was pretty good, but I can only go 3.5 stars. I have not written a review yet, so I'm still wavering between 3.5. Then I read This Scot of Mine by Sophie Jordan, And this one, again, I haven't written a review because I just finished this one yesterday. And here, Lady Clara is trying to escape her vile fiancé, so she develops a bold lie that she's pregnant by another man. Well, her reputation is in tatters, and the fiancé obviously wants nothing to do with her now. So to escape all the gossip and all the rumors, she goes to her brother Marcus's house. Marcus is the, the Duke of Ottenbury. And his best friend is the Laird Hunt McLaren. And through the course of things, Marcus says to Hunt, "I think you should marry my ruined sister." And he tells Marcus why she's ruined. The thing is, Marcus is a victim of a curse where his father and his grandfather and other male members of his family have died either when their wives got pregnant or when they had their babies. So the curse is if he fathers a child, he will die. But the thing is, he wants to be a father. So in order to be a father, why not marry Clara? As it is, they like each other. They're very drawn to one another. They met even before she got to Marcus's home, so they already had a connection. So why not offer to marry her? And there's something here that affects this story because Marcus is still under curse. But I don't think I'm going to tell you why, because I think that if you read the story, you'll see why he's still under curse. So that's The Scot of Mine by Sophie Jordan. 5 stars, 4.5 stars, I'm sorry. The last book I read was A Princess in Theory by Reluctant Royals. And Princess in Theory I got because I grabbed a hold of the 3rd book from Etta Weiss, and so quite naturally I wanted to read the previous books in the series. Now, in A Princess in Theory, it's a story that is very similar to Coming to America, the movie with Eddie Murphy and Arsenio Hall. So you have a prince that comes to America because he's looking for a bride. Not just a bride or any bride, but a particular bride. The woman he's looking for is the Lady Smith, or Letty. He calls her Letty. Letty Smith, who she doesn't have time for the fairy tales because she's getting emails, correspondence that allude to a betrothal, a wedding, a prince, and how they want her, and she's earmarked for this, and she gets very confused. She's an orphan. She's busy. She's trying to make her life. She's a grad student. She has a lot of jobs. She doesn't have time to worry about all of that. Well, she meets this guy named Jamal. At least that's what she thinks his name is, Jamal. Well, she meets Jamal, and he comes to the restaurant she's working at because he comes with his resume for a job. He's completely unskilled, but because he has such an excellent resume, she decides to try and train him. And that doesn't last long, but it does last long enough for her to feel very drawn to him. He's as drawn to her as she is to him, but he's actually the prince. He's the Prince Thabiso of the throne of Thessalo. He is the prince that his people have been corresponding with her. Yes, he came to get her. It's a great little story. Like I said, it reminds me a lot of the movie. They have instant chemistry, but she doesn't want him to know of her past as an orphan, and he is not sure how to tell her that he is a prince and that she is his betrothed. Why is she his betrothed? Well, you'll have to read the story to find out. That's it. There was a 15th book that I almost finished, but as I mentioned, I think I'll do better as a reviewer if I read the whole series, so I won't include that book. All right, thank you for all your time. I'm sorry the video went so long. I don't know how to talk briefly. I tend to go on and on, so I hope that at least 1, 2, or 3 of these books will appeal to you. I'll list everything in the description below, and I look forward to hearing from you. All right, bye-bye.